So, first of all, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to present here some of the updates concerning the ResectDB and more specifically about the standardized system for interpreting mutations associated with drug resistance in M. tuberculosis. And as you know, one of the key points of the use of whole genome sequencing is the data analysis. And there are several user-friendly tools that have been developed for this purpose. However, the interpretation of such data is often left to end users, and there are no internationally recognized criteria to interpret mutations in the view of drug resistance in M. tuberculosis. And this is a major gap for the usefulness of this tool. And within the ResectDB, we used a consensus-driven approach to develop a grading system for such interpretation. And this grading system is based on main 4 criteria. So first of all, the frequency of mutation among drug-resistant and drug-susceptible isolates. Second, homoplasy, and then we are going to use MIC values and functional genetics as additional information to better understand the mutations that are in the gray zone, let's say. So according to this approach, every single mutation is going to be associated with a score or a grading index. And this grading index is calculated by a statistical mean, and we have now 5 main categories. So this applies to the first step of this grading approach, and this starts with the use of frequency of mutation in resistant and susceptible cases. The frequency have been used to calculate likelihood and odds ratio and associated p-value and 95% confidence intervals. And then we applied the thresholds that have been developed in the field of evidence-based medicine. As you can see here, if the likelihood ratio is above 10, we have high confidence mutations for resistance. If the likelihood ratio is between 5 and 10, we have moderate confidence. If the likelihood ratio is between 1 and 5, we have minimal confidence mutations. And if we have likelihood ratio below 1, we know that mutations are not associated with resistance. If we have not enough statistical power to discriminate what is going on, we have indeterminate mutations. And to develop this approach, we started from the literature because we know that we have a lot of Sanger sequencing data there. So we performed a systematic review of the literature, and we focused on a list of genes and drugs of interest according to what's suggested by the ResectDB experts. We gathered from this literature review a lot of data, but most importantly, we obtained raw frequency of mutations in resistant and susceptible cases to apply our statistical approach. And this is the starting data set. We considered 11 drugs for 16 genomic loci. We screened more than 1,700 unique papers to retrieve raw sequencing and phenotypic association data. And we ended up with data sets from more than 40 countries and up to more than 10,000 isolates, especially for rifampicin and isoniazid, of course, that are the most studied drugs. And this is the output. So for each single drug, you have a list of high confidence, moderate, and minimal confidence mutations. And of course, there is nothing new for some of them, such as the 531L mutation in RPOB or the 315T mutation in CATG. And also now we have a list of mutations that we are pretty sure that are not associated with resistance. In total, we found more than 380 mutations that could be graded according to this system, and I'm going to show you some of the advantages of this system. So first of all, we have a list of mutations we do not need to care about calling the phenotype because they are not associated with drug resistance. We can use these high confidence markers to identify problems in the phenotypic DST, and likely we can also use these mutations to correct the phenotypic DST. Many of you are aware that some mutations have been found to be associated with resistance on solid media, but susceptible on liquid media. And in this graph, you have the solid media on the first column and the liquid DST for the second column for each drug. And as you can see here, the distribution of confidence mutations differs among different testing medium. So what this means, for example, we are able to identify mutations that are always associated with resistance, but with different confidence according to the testing method used. We can identify mutations that we know that are causing MIC values really close to the breakpoint of liquid testing, for example, and so we have a distribution that is likely 50-50 among resistant and susceptible cases, but that are clearly associated with resistance on solid medium. And we also can easily solve the problem of mutations that are consistently missed by one of the two testing methods due to the critical concentration used for the phenotypic DST. What are the implications of this? So here I'm reporting the sensitivity and the specificity of 3 different approaches. In black, you have any mutation approach, so you don't care about the grade of the mutation. If you have a mutation, you are going to use it to cause resistance. In blue, you have the graded mutations compared to the phenotypic DST as reference, and in red, you have the graded mutations used as marker for resistance, so correcting the phenotypic DST if they are reported in susceptible cases. So as you can see here, for most of the drugs, the sensitivity of the use of these mutations is not really affected, except for ethionamide, because we had only a few hundreds of strains and the statistical power is suffering this. And for pyrazinamide, because we have a lot of unique mutations, and again, the statistical approach is suffering here. However, if we look at the specificity, you see an increase in the ability to correctly identify resistant cases compared to the any mutation approach. And summarizing, we can improve up to 13% the specificity by the use of this mutation with a relatively loss of sensitivity, with a reduction of very major errors. So to conclude, we identified, we were able to compile a list of nearly 400 graded mutations that can be used to identify drug-resistant cases. And this system is really suitable for automated classification of mutations and is using a statistical measure that is not relying on the local prevalence of these mutations. The advantage also of this grading system is that we are going to implement an homoplasy evaluation in order to keep into account the population structure, and also we are going to include MIC and functional genetic data. Of course, this process, this grading system is going to be evaluated probably once a year, like in the HIVDB, and constantly updated. Finally, I would like to thank all the people that contributed to this work, and in particular also the ResectB expert panels and the team at the CPTR for their support in merging the various parts of this job. Thank you.